Big Papa Fascist, Andrew Wilson from the Crucible, messaged me a couple of days ago and asked if I wanted to debate somebody on I think it was whether or not they should Christians see trans women as real women. So yeah, that is a rough way to word this debate. So that is definitely not in my favor. You guys should all be ready for me to totally screw this debate up. I don't have a lot of confidence going into this one.
And we're back. Welcome, Tomfoolery, Posh Redneck, to the Crucible. How you guys doing this evening?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing well myself.
You look like you're half asleep, Posh.
I just have very tiny eyes.
Fair enough. Hang on a second. Sorry. All right. So we kind of talked in the background just to make sure that everybody had the prop down. Nobody's confused about it. Going to let Tomfoolery open first. But before we do that, let's move over and get some introductions in. Tomfoolery, take a second, introduce yourself, shout your channel out, do all that jazz.
Yeah, my name's Tom. I go by Tomfoolery Show on YouTube. I do politics, philosophy, mostly focus on language and linguistics. I do lots of streaming, and then I also put out long-form video essays and all sorts of debates. Appreciate you having me on. I'm excited. I heard I'm getting unbanned, so that's awesome.
Were you banned?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, well, I mean, we'll correct that. Make sure when Tomfoolery comes back in, we ban him. Posh Redneck, take a minute, introduce yourself, shout your channel out, do all that stuff.
Here's the Posh Redneck. I also am a linguist by trade. I also dabble a lot in philosophy and theology and not that much politics, although I do like to do that. For example, what Andrew mentioned before, I could identify that what he's doing with his mods is basically the broken windows theory in economics. So, unban people so there are mods to ban them. So I'm happy to see that he's a leftist. Basically.
I mean, if there's a supply shortage, we'll just make the supply, right? We'll just make
exactly. Very, very nice of you.
Appreciate that very much. So, Tom, we're going to start with you. You've got 7 minutes on the clock for your opening statement. You can take as much of that as you want, as little of that as you want. You can be as brief or as long-winded, but I will stop you at the 7-minute mark. And you can go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Yeah. First off, I'm gonna have a lot of trouble here. This guy's voice is so authoritative. I'm probably just going to I'm just gonna bow down to everything he says. I feel like already it's gonna be very.
Well, that was the shortest debate in history. No, I'm kidding.
True.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
All right. So yeah. From what a woman is normally going to be decided from a language perspective. Things that are womanly or fall under the categorization of womanhood or feminine all change over time, just as language changes over time. No word is stagnant and stays in one place. It all changes. Words like cool used to just mean that it was cold. Over time, now it means that something is good or that we like it. Same with the word woman. Didn't even exist a couple hundred years ago, but over time, different words combined to mean new things. The word man just meant human. So I feel like woman is taking on a new meaning, and we use it already in the way that we would use it to include trans people. So I'm not saying this because I want to be inclusive. I believe that the way that we use the word already includes them. We technically use it to look at somebody who is feminine and refer to them. If we call somebody who is not feminine a woman, people are going to be confused and it's not going to make sense, which is why I think it's good to make the distinction between a woman and a female, because female will have this scientific definition to it, and woman will have a socially understood definition to it that will give us more utility. That's it.
So technically, it's okay to say she has a big dick, Tom.
I suppose so, yeah.
Okay, just curious. Posh Redneck, we'll start the count over. You got 7 minutes. Go ahead when ready.
All right. So I also don't have a long intro because I would agree with a lot that Tom has said. Words change meanings, but words are used to describe things. They don't change the things that are being described. And I believe that outside of that, people tend to break apart the biological male-female thing or distinction, and then say that man-woman is this gender thing. And I think we will have to get into that, because I believe it's arbitrary, except for the fact that I believe it's a cultural instantiation of what how a male or how a female behaves. And this is going to, again, have to be discussed between the two of us, because we know, for example, that if you say women didn't wear pants, that is something that could only apply to a very select group of people geographically. But at the same time, even in those cultures, except if you go for like extreme weather conditions, which are going to really limit that, like the Inuits, you're going to have still disambiguations, different clothing worn by men and by women. The Greeks and the Romans, neither of them wore pants. They saw it as barbaric, but they still had ways that in which men dressed and in which women dressed. If you want to call that socio-cultural and call that gender, sure, that does not mean that is not conditional on there being the male-female biological sex difference. As far as Christianity itself is concerned, because the topic of the debate is, in Christianity, is this acceptable? Then we would have to go to either the scriptures themselves, or in the history of the church, a church father or a council that made a declaration that we could make this distinction, or have any evidence of like a seed form existing there. And we don't have that, and my opponent is going to maybe try and show otherwise. So I think all of this is going to be in the interchange as opposed to our opening statement. So I will end it there.
All right, very brief opening statements. That's okay. I still think this is going to be quite a good debate. Before we get into it, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, do all that shit. We're back from a channel strike that beat us down pretty good, but we'll crank right back up in the algorithm. I had to delete a whole bunch of old content because of mass reporting scumbags. So that always hurts, but it's all right. We'll get back to where we were. So without further ado, I'm going to open up the floor between you guys. I do expect you to adhere to moderation. Even if you really don't like what I'm saying, it doesn't matter. It's my show, and here you are. So I appreciate you both being here tonight. And the floor is open, gentlemen. Go ahead.
At the end of your statement, you said it doesn't seat something. Can you tell me what you said again? I sometimes your volume drops off at the end of some of your statements, and I didn't understand the last part.
Which exact part do you mean?
I'm not sure. All I heard is it doesn't seat the same or something like that towards the end, and then you concluded.
I'm not actually sure that.
Okay, because then you said, Tom is going to argue that. And so that's what I was.
Oh, that we can find in the scriptures or in statements of church fathers or councils, statements that we can have this disambiguation between sex and gender, and how that would actually work out. Not exactly perhaps the phraseology being implemented. The phraseology is rather recent, and that tends to happen when new movements happen in philosophy, etc. But at least that we could find it in seed form. Maybe that was the phrase that confused you. But I said maybe you could prove me wrong on that.
Well, so my argument is that, like, pragmatically, we already use the word the way that that I'm arguing for. So generally, I'm like, we get definitions based on how we already use words. That's kind of what that's the direction that I'm coming at it from, is to say that we already use it to identify femininity, somebody who looks feminine, or somebody who encompasses the idea of a woman, but it's going to be based mostly on how they look. We're not like checking their genitalia or anything like that.
But then you would have the problem, if the topic is transgenderism and Christianity, we're going to have to go to the scriptures. and the phraseology implemented there, and go into the grammatical historical method, which would be how was that word used then? Because a lot of things have changed since the Old Testament and the New Testament. So I understand that in modern days we could decide that woman means, water bottle. And if that catches on, because dictionaries is someone who, I don't know how much expertise you have in linguistics, but if you even dabble in it, you would know that dictionaries don't imbue words with meanings, they record how words are used.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Right, but just because we at a certain point change how we use a word does not mean that the original author would have used the word with the exact same change. In fact, it's the opposite of that.
Well, so I agree, and that's why I'm saying that I don't. So in the Bible, when it talks about a woman, it is talking about a female, and I'm saying that generally now, because the word has taken on new meaning, we're no longer talking about a female. We're talking about something else. And so whether or not we would call a trans woman a woman is now based on something different, not based on whether or not she's a female.
Okay, so I understand what you mean, but at the same time, my argument still stands. If St. Paul writes about women and it means females, that means that, or like the famous one, Deuteronomy 22:5, that men shall not dress like women and women like men, that it is an abomination before the Lord, that would still mean male and female. So even though you could superimpose the word woman on that, that would not change the original commandment.
Well, so you gave the example earlier of like women wearing pants. So would women wearing pants then also be wrong?
It would depend on the cultural context. If in the cultural context it's only men who wear pants and women only dresses or skirts, then yes. But so I mentioned also the Inuits, where you would have everyone wearing very, very thick layered clothing.
Okay. So if leftists had their way and they were able to like abolish gender in some sense, then there would be no cultural sense of what a woman wears and what a man wears. Therefore, what Paul said no longer would apply, right?
No, because as Christians, we have also the tradition, and the tradition is very clear on that. But hypothetically, in a hypothetical world, you could argue that, but we don't live in a hypothetical world. We live in a world in which Christianity has existed for 2,000 years, and its practices have been maintained. If you go to an Orthodox monastery, a lot of times, because modernity has set into the culture, so to speak, and I know this, I've been with choirs and all sorts of things, like you go to a monastery, especially female monasteries, there'd be a nun walking out and handing out these like skirts and head coverings, hair coverings to be more precise, just with an elastic band on them, so you at least have that. But that is because they adhere to this higher law, this biblical Christian law, and the Christian tradition. So the fact that leftists might get their way on who knows what does not change that it would be compatible with Christianity.
So you're saying it's based on cultural norms, but if cultural norms went in a direction where there was no longer a differential between manhood and womanhood, Christianity would still expect that differential to still exist?
Well, Christianity started out in a Greco-Roman culture, but under the Roman Empire, and they had all sorts of norms that Christianity did not accept, like all sorts of forms of worship, which Christianity saw as idolatry and refused outright. When Christianity became the dominant religion, it imposes these rules, and as we see it now receding, unfortunately, Christianity will still have its norms and will apply them. What I said that with norms is it's a conscious effort to try and do something. So if you consciously wear a dress or a skirt, like in the Highlands, Scottish Highlands, they have, and in other places, of course, they have the kilts, That to them is not something only a woman does, even though in other parts of Europe that would be something only a woman would wear. But they are not doing it out of the intention of dressing like the opposite sex. So that is the mentality behind it. That is the reason why they're doing it, and that is why the culture there would not be. It could be properly Christian, but people still wearing kilts.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just a little confusing because so it's culturally dependent. So do you think that Christian women should not wear pants then?
I am of the opinion that in church, absolutely not. But as far as it goes, even into the wider cultural context, you would even have disambiguations between women's pants and men's pants, etc. Again, with Christianity, it is about the intent, not exactly the superficial exterior things. So again, we're talking about male and female, and in certain cultures, these will have certain ways they work themselves into aesthetics and manners of behavior, and these will be all informed by Christianity. If these cultural norms cease to be Christian, Christianity doesn't change, the culture is removing itself from Christianity. That is my point. That is why I'm saying that you can't legalize it to that extent where you can say, oh no, if you have separate cloth cylinders for each of your legs, that's not going to make you transgender. That's not how it works. However, with the church, it will reinforce, or at least should, people can be lax about it, should reinforce the Christian teaching where it's more strict, not absent, shouldn't be absent in the culture. And if that culture should move away from Christianity, that does not mean that then this behavior is amenable to Christianity or could be considered part of it. It means it's outside of it and moving more and more away from it.
So does the for somebody who has gender dysphoria, is that not taken into account whatsoever? Because I feel like there's lots of things in the Bible that would make it seem as though somebody with a mental illness probably shouldn't take medication, or there's lots of like things that they would do that generally, like through science, we would say they probably can't help these things. But Christianity, the Bible, where they couldn't understand these things at the time, would have said that this is wrong. Do you think that the mental illness for gender dysphoria changes this whatsoever?
I mean, already good luck calling it mental illness nowadays, because those parameters will keep shifting again and again. This is one of the few things that postmodernists got right, even though anyone could have gotten it right, that what is considered mentally ill is going to be dependent on the surrounding culture. At the same time, if someone is mentally ill, we don't consider them to be evil, because if someone has body integrity identity disorder and they believe their hand does not belong to them, I don't say, oh, they're pretending they're making it up, because people actually do go ahead and dismember themselves and do all sorts of chemical interventions with their bodies to stop that. I think that it is an illness, and it should be treated as an illness and not encouraged or accepted as normal. It should be treated as an illness. When you ask, you shouldn't take drugs, I don't know where you got that from. I know there are groups of Christians who even say blood transfusions are evil or something. Again, I'm from the Orthodox Church, which I hold to be the true Christianity that was established by Christ. But at the same time, like, we wouldn't say, oh no, you shouldn't take an aspirin or something. There might be, but that is something to be decided on a case-by-case basis. If these people have problems, we try to pray for them, we try to help them, but we do not accept, or let alone encourage or celebrate, like it's happening today, that they have this mental illness.
Well, so the reason that so when I'm talking about like taking drugs, I'm talking about like changing your frame of mind, doing, I would consider some things to be analogous to getting drunk, or yeah, drinking way too much and getting drunk.
So
You're changing
drugs
your
as psychedelics, not drugs as in medicaments.
why? What would the difference
I'm
be?
asking you what you
Oh
mean
no,
when
I'm
you say
talking
drugs.
about, so yes, something that would change your frame of mind to where you would think differently than the way that God made you.
Oh yes, Christianity is against that type of drugs. I thought you meant in a more general sense, like medicine.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about, yeah, like lithium for somebody who has bipolar disorder. Like those people would need some sort of drug probably to level out. But lots of Christians would say that this is wrong because it's changing your frame of mind. The reason that I bring this up is because, as you said, like, yeah, there's a gender dysphoria is a mental illness. The prescription for them, the lithium for them, is to present in a different way. So even though you shouldn't change your frame of mind, normally we would say, well, you have a mental illness, to where lithium actually brings you closer to what it is that we would expect to be a clear-headed frame of mind. Just as somebody who has gender dysphoria, transitioning would bring them closer to someone with a clear-headed frame of mind.
Well, this would go into also a case-by-case basis, of course. But for example, it's not just about changing your frame of mind, because you have people who have very, very serious, levels of cancer developing, and they have immense amounts of pain. And we wouldn't say giving them a type of opiate would be evil, at least not that I've heard anyone argue. I'm sure there are people who would, like fundamental Baptists or like some type of Jehovah's Witnesses, although I don't know how Jehovah's Witnesses are Christian. But there are people who would argue maybe that. But again, it is responding to a particular situation. And if these people are so broken that they need that type of help, that is something to consult with the church, with the clergy, people who can deal with it on an individual basis. You cannot have just a general outlook, and those who do are incredibly imprudent, let's say, about approaching things in these generalities and trying to turn it into a type of rule. So if that is something that could help them, then so be it. But ultimately, we see everything as having a spiritual basis, and our main approach to that is prayer and again, the spiritual approach.
Yeah, I mean, I saw somebody just comment saying like lithium's meant to change the mind, not the body. But my point is that changing the body is what changes the mind for somebody with a mental illness. If we see their dysphoric, their dysphoria go down, likelihood of suicidality go down with transitioning, these would be similar to taking lithium, though it's possible we come up with a better prescription later on. The more that this is studied, hopefully that's the case. But currently, it seems as though this is like what gives them the best chance at existing within society, being able to carry on, being able to have a clear frame of mind, and I feel like that would be an exception, just like I think taking painkillers is going to change your frame of mind, but we would say, well, it's kind of necessary within the circumstances.
Yeah, again, it would be circumstance dependent, and that is something for the church to be consulted with. But back to our question, I mean, to the topic of our debate, I don't see how anything you said means that this is therefore compatible with Christianity.
Well, that is the argument that I'm making right now, is that if we are accepting of scientific prescriptions for mental illnesses or for some sort of medical need, if the prescription that comes with this is transitioning, existing like a woman, and looking like a woman, being treated like a woman, then this would be part of that. I feel like this would be analogous to other prescriptions for other types of medical needs and mental illnesses.
Well, does that mean we affirm every type of conclusion with a mental illness? You know, all sorts of people, you know, like hearing voices, you know, having difficulty, distinguishing between reality and dreams and all types of illnesses that occur. So would that mean that if we go around affirming them, like someone who's anorexic, do we just say, oh, no, yes, you are fat, keep on not eating? And when they're dead, you know, maybe they identify as alive, and that's fine then.
That would depend on the scientific consensus. If science says, yes, the best way for this person to exist, the best prescription for them in order to live is for us to affirm them, then yeah, but obviously we have medication, we have other ways of treating those people, and so that's not currently the case. But that is the case for people with gender dysphoria.
If that is the case for people with any type of illness, mental or otherwise, that means we try to bring them around to being healthy, not affirm their already existing problem. If you consider it a mental illness, we can agree it's an illness. No one goes around affirming illnesses as, affirm that it is an illness, but not how it plays out. So we, from a Christian perspective, if someone has gender dysphoria for whatever reason, you know, some people develop it as a result of trauma or something, we wouldn't say, oh, therefore this person is just, you know, fruity because they watch, you know, cartoons or anime or something. That's not how we should approach it. We should approach this with the idea of healing, not affirming. That is the Christian perspective, because we get nowhere in Christianity that if someone sort of feels like the opposite sex, then we should encourage it. There's nowhere we find this, not in the scriptures, not in the writings of the church fathers, and not in conciliar statements. You're sort of superimposing a non-Christian, so to speak, secular approach and saying, well, then we should import it into Christianity.
Well, I think Christianity already imports new discoveries and new scientific understandings, especially with medicine. So when you say like, well, what they need is healing, well, then somebody who has bipolar disorder shouldn't take lithium, because that's not fixing their bipolar disorder. They need to fix bipolar, not take something that's going to ease it. And then you say, well, and they need to do something that's healthy. Well, what is healthy? Healthy is like you being able to exist within society just like everybody else. That would be transitioning. Currently, that is the consensus, is that is like, it's not a great way, but it currently is as good as it can possibly get for somebody with gender dysphoria. That is what is healthy for them. That's what makes it to where they're capable of existing within society like everybody else. And so if that's the case, then yeah, I would expect other people to abide by those prescriptions and also treat them like women.
Hang on, before you get into your response, there was a bunch of people in the chat who were asking what your denomination is, Tom. I was unaware of this. I actually didn't know this until tonight, but I guess Tom no longer considers himself to be a Christian. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've seen you in my chat a couple of times while I've had conversations about this, so I guess I just assumed you already knew. I grew up a fundamentalist Baptist, and then eventually a Southern Baptist as well. Currently, I'm more agnostic on it, I'm currently. I
Okay.
wouldn't consider.
I just wanted to get that clarification out. That's all. I didn't want to break up the flow of the debate. Go ahead, Posh.
Yeah, so we did mention this in the green room, as it's called. So to make an analogy, as I mentioned, body integrity identity disorder. So if someone thought their hand didn't belong to them, do we go ahead and surgically remove it?
I feel like I've answered this in numerous times, that this would depend on what it is that makes them healthy. It depends on what the best prescription is currently. One medication is not always the best medication. Sometimes we find another one and move on to that. But currently, the best prescription, yes, is for somebody to transition. This is what lowers the dysphoria, and the dysphoria is what is making them unhealthy. The dysphoria is what is giving them problems existing within society.
So basically, you're saying that if hypothetically we had a pill that removed gender dysphoria, that is what we should use, but this is the best we've got.
Yes.
Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So is that based in Christian tradition or scriptures or theology?
I don't think taking lithium is based in Christian scriptures, but we've already agreed that that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
Sure, as I said, it could be the case, but how is chemically or otherwise castrating someone and then having them engage in as a male dressing up as a female and then superimposing, as I said, this idea of gender and saying this is now a woman? This is not I'm not saying it's a female, I'm saying it's a woman. A distinction we don't find in Christianity, and I actually don't believe exists except for this idea, as I said, an instantiation of a biological category in a particular culture at a particular time. So they can't be removed from each other. I don't believe that dressing someone up in the opposite gender in a particular culture now makes them the opposite sex, because that is dependent on the sex. And again, we try to tolerate as much as we can with someone who is ill. We don't go around castrating them. We don't go around drugging them up any more than is absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. And we try to do what we can, and try not to, well, we shouldn't break Christian norms, but try not to be so stringent to the point that it could actually harm the person themselves. But again, I don't see how castrating someone, doing all sorts of, plastic surgery and body, modification of this kind is helping them outside of just affirming a certain reality that they believe to be the case, whereas we don't find it anywhere in Christianity.
Well, again, a mental illness is normally something that gives you trouble existing within society. You can have a mental illness in some other tribe. You can be totally bipolar. You can be schizophrenic. Probably helps you go off and like kill other people. Being a psychopath, like maybe, if we want to go kill the other tribe on a consistent basis, you being a psychopath is actually very beneficial to us in our society. But in this society, things that cause you problems existing within society are what we categorize as mental illnesses. And so if somebody is dysphoric, this is the problem. The problem is dysphoria. And so when you say, oh, well, I don't understand how this helps. Well, if it lowers dysphoria, then what else is there? Like that is the only thing that could, like the only thing that can lower dysphoria that we understand right now is transitioning. There isn't a pill. There isn't any other option. So you saying you don't understand, I almost don't even believe that you don't understand. I think you do understand. Obviously, lowering the dysphoria is what it is that we're trying to do, and that's what transitioning does currently.
If you want to put it in a so to say neutral, secular idea, that could work in Christianity. That is absolutely out of the question. And I would, if you want to have a different debate where we talk about whether that is possible even in those circumstances, okay. Where in Christianity do you find justification for such action or the recommendation for such action? If we say homosexuality is a sin in Christianity, we don't say, oh, let them, bomb it out, a couple of times because that lowers their lust or something. There's no precedent for that.
Yeah, I'm going to go right back to what I've said the last couple of times. We don't find taking lithium in the Bible. We don't find this in Christianity. We don't find most of our medical prescriptions within Christianity. These are all secular ideas that have been accepted by Christianity because we understand the benefit from them. And so this is the same thing. There is a benefit to this. And then because of the benefit, we would accept the prescription. And part of that prescription would be accepting these people as the gender that they that their dysphoria causes them to identify as.
sorry to bring this up, but in the chat, Father Deacon and I said lobotomy would reduce dysphoria. So, and that is actually a good question to ask. You know, if we scramble someone's brain to the point where we put them in a vegetative state, that would lower dysphoria. Shouldn't we do that?
It
would
lower
bring it down to
dysphoria.
a zero.
That yes, it would. And again, we're talking about the best possible option. Again, there could be better ones. There could later be other, discoveries that are made. But currently, I think that we would all agree that them going into society and being able to work and being able to go to school and being able to exist like anybody else is probably better than getting lobotomized. Just as we don't think that people should probably change their frame of mind, they shouldn't get drunk, but we would accept them taking lithium if that's what they're prescribed, if that's actually necessary based on their mental illness.
So, as I mentioned, in Christianity, we have a prohibition even with transvestite, which means dressing like the opposite sex, irrespective of whether that person could function better. And I brought up homosexuality because that is something Christianity forbids, even though you could say that the individual homosexual would feel better if there was same-sex marriage or something. It would allow them to operate better. I've heard this from so-called conservative, pro same-sex marriage commentators saying, "Oh no, like all of this that happens with in the homosexual community is because they can't get married and have a family like the heterosexuals. So we should have same-sex marriage for this purpose." I'm saying, even though in that sense, maybe it would make them feel better, but it's against Christianity, it's against Christian norms, it's against everything taught by the scriptures and the fathers and the councils. So what I think where we're having the disconnect is you're saying this individual might feel better about it, but I'm saying the solution of then breaking Christian norms is against Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So the disconnect is, I think you're being more of a utilitarian and then saying if we focus on this individual, that individual might feel better because of this. But just like we wouldn't allow for homosexuality as Christians, or at least we shouldn't, there are people who, never mind, that's a different rant to go on. The same thing is with this, with the transgender issue. You can't just break Christian norms and say it's Christianity because this person might feel better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm not using a utilitarian stance. I'm using a Christian stance, just as I would be consistent with lithium and all of those other things. I'm saying that you are being inconsistent with the way that you would prescribe a solution for any mental illness. This is just like any other prescription. It is what is meant to, it is meant to lower whatever the problem is, or try to ease that problem as much as possible. This is just like any other prescription. It's just that you're accepting of one prescription that is not necessarily in accordance with Christianity, but you are not accepting of the other prescription that is also, yeah.
That's a big thing. Yes, we are for accepting solutions that are within the bounds of Christian teaching and against those which are without the bounds of Christian teaching. That's what we are arguing here. So to bring it back, so is same-sex marriage compatible with Christianity because we see as Christians, we see the homosexuality, the urge as a problem, and maybe engaging in it every so often would lower the general urge. Should Christians allow for that in your assessment?
I would say probably not, but
okay.
This is outside of the bounds of what we're talking about. When we're talking about a mental illness and a medical prescription, being gay doesn't currently have a medical prescription or isn't considered a mental illness, so that would be disanalogous.
Well, again, would it be if you're saying currently, that would have to go into all sorts of could go into all sorts of other things like bestiality. You know, if we stop categorizing that, does that mean it's now okay? Or we shouldn't see it as Christians, we shouldn't see it as a problem to combat, because there are, in Europe, unfortunately, already places which don't criminalize it as long as the animal doesn't suffer. Again, with Christianity, because it's based in the scriptures, works of the church fathers, and the conciliar statements. I know when you say lithium, okay, maybe it was a type of herb that was used back then for a certain thing, but now we've got a much more isolated chemical that was present in the herb that we could use. I understand that medical science has progressed, and massively so. And again, Christianity is going to have to evaluate what we accept, what we do not.
Mm-hmm.
So Christianity is against eugenics. You could say that back in the day, plenty of scientists thought eugenics was the way to go. That doesn't mean Christianity accepts it. Even though the medical science at the time would accept it, the same thing would go for lobotomy. So I understand there's also not always a clear answer, but I think that when all of Christian tradition is against this, you don't accept it for the potential benefit of these people feeling a bit better.
I mean, yeah, so I'm showing that you are being hypocritical, and then you're doing a whataboutism, saying, well, what about gay people? What about these other things? But currently, like, it would be on you to reason why this is not a hypocrisy when you are accepting of some prescriptions that would not align with Christian values, though the church accepts it. And the church says, well, no, this is okay now. You need to explain why the church would not accept other prescriptions that seem to be analogous. And I don't feel like I've gotten that yet.
Well, for example, someone who's a woman having a child unexpectedly, perhaps an abortion would definitely ease her pain or problems or anxiety, or help her socioeconomic status or something. Christianity rejects it, even though we've got the medical technology to do it. That's one thing, because it's immoral. But when
what was the example?
Abortion.
Okay.
Right. So that does not mean that if you have the perfect way to do abortion, perfectly safe, no massive damage that it is done to the woman, either hormonally or physically or whatever.
You understand, abortion is not a medical prescription. This is something that they allow somebody to do. Again, when we're talking about mental illnesses, I'm trying to get you to stay within something that is analogous in some way that actually aligns with what we're talking about.
Okay, but I'm giving you the reason why we reject something, even though there's medical equipment or
you are, but that's going to apply to lithium as well, and then you're not going to round.
As I said, if you think the problem with lithium is changing a state of mind, there are plenty of people, like with the Mormons, they think coffee is too much. But again, the church is a living organism. It can make these decisions in alignment with tradition. And if it should decide that painkillers are good for someone who has terminal cancer in some pretty late stage, then the church can make that decision for that individual. It does not mean that now flips back to, okay, you can be drunk all the time because now changing the state of mind is okay.
That's my argument. That's what I'm saying. Is that yes, like you can't just say people can be drunk now because it has nothing to do with a mental illness. It's not a medical prescription. But when you say like, well, it has to be in line with Christian tradition, at some point, lithium and changing your state of mind in this way was not in line with Christian tradition, and the church was not accepting of these things. Eventually they were, because they understood the medical benefits of it. And I'm saying, just as they did with that, it would start to make sense if eventually they acknowledge the medical benefits with this. And I I just feel like you're just giving me more whataboutisms with other things instead of actually squaring the circle, circling the square, whatever. Yeah, you get it.
Circling the square. Circling the square.
Triangulating it. Okay, so I'm not doing whataboutisms. I'm giving comparisons, and the reason is, if you think that this has, as I said, secularly speaking, benefits, that's one thing. Saying it's in alignment with Christianity is a different thing. And Christianity forbids this whole idea of men dressing like women or women like men. And as far as Christianity is concerned, when the documents were written, and by documents I mean again the scriptures and later statements by church fathers and councils, we lost my train of thought there. They had no disambiguation between gender and sex. So if it goes against Christian norms to do that, we don't do it. And that's why I was saying with homosexuality, maybe these people would have less of an urge. Maybe it's better to have it, 3 times a month than every day. That's not how we decide things. We decide things in this manner, that it's forbidden because all the tradition says it's forbidden. It's against the laws of God. And sure, we could also drug them up, give them some type of hormonal treatment which lowers sexual urges in general. But that is not how we deal with things. We deal with things mostly spiritually, and we try to help them. And if we succeed, so be it. But we don't break the religion for this reason.
Okay, so originally when we're talking about you shouldn't get drunk, the original translations of this did not use any sort of word analogous to being drunk, because drunk back then just meant stupid. It just meant acting a fool. What the original things were saying is not to use some sort of substance that would make you stupid. That is what it was saying. Lithium literally does this. This is what lithium does, is it lowers your your brain's ability to think the same way that it was before. It does kind of makes you very cloudy and have trouble thinking. This is what lithium does. It is doing the thing that we are saying does not align with Christianity. It is doing that thing. It is doing that. And so
Christianity is against murder, and stabbing someone cutting their belly open would be pretty murderous. Mm-hmm. That does not mean Christianity is against surgery.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
You're helping my point. Yes.
Well, no, because I don't understand your point about drunkenness as to say that's not the same thing as acting stupid. Like, of course, like they didn't have breathalyzers back then, and Moses said don't go over this amount. Of course, being drunk means that you've had so much alcohol that you are rendered this ridiculous person. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand why you said there was no drunkenness in that sense. So the entire point, as you continued on, is why I connected that to saying surgery versus stabbing.
Okay. The point was to say that when they're talking about drunkenness, they're talking about changing your frame of mind. They're talking about making yourself stupid. That is what they're talking about, just as lithium does. That is what I'm saying, is that they're not just saying, well, drinking too much is really the problem. No, they're talking about the frame of mind that makes you stupid. And that is what I'm comparing this to, is I'm saying lithium does that. It does exactly what it is that they are saying you should not do, yet you are accepting of this.
Well, no, I mean, when the drunkenness part is it's self-indulgence.
All right, hang on.
Get you to the point.
We have been over this part multiple times. Can we bring this back to trans in the church? Right. And I think I understand the argument. You're looking for consistency here. I get that. but can we thread this back to what we're here to talk about, which is if being transgender is compatible with Christianity? So maybe we can kind of bring this back to that topic.
I don't know if there's a way for me to do it outside of this, because this is the argument, is that like this is the prescription for people to exist within society. This is the medical prescription.
Okay, I understand. So I'm not going to try to hamper your argument, but maybe you can reframe it so that we're not talking about lithium and drugs, but we can actually tie it to trans people directly. That way the audience doesn't get lost.
I mean, I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy with lithium and other drugs. It's just hypocritical. It's just they are accepting of some things and not others. And I'm asking for a reason that would delineate the two. And I'm not getting one. I'm getting tradition, but tradition was broken with these other things. And that's just it. Like, he's just not capable of delineating these.
And that's why I likened it to surgery, because they did have surgery as primitive as it was compared to today. People still didn't equate it with just murdering someone. Likewise, if you take painkillers or any type of sedative medication, if you do it for fun, then it's sinful. If you do it because there's a medical purpose to it, it's a different thing. It's a completely different consideration. And Christianity never recognized the idea that a man can become a woman. And if we want to go there, then you would have to explain to me then, like, what does it mean for a man to become a woman? Or a woman a man, if you prefer that direction.
Okay. Yeah, because also, so the framing of the debate was like, why should you do this as a Christian? And meaning that there's some sort of imperative. And so that's kind of what I'm framing this as, to say that there is some imperative there, just like there would be with any other medical issue. But a woman, I would say, is somebody who looks like a woman, acts like a woman. Womanhood is a conceptual idea of femininity. We're not like checking chromosomes or gametes on people. That would be more about like, whether or not you're a female. But a woman is one who looks like a woman and acts like a woman. They fit the roles of a woman. That's how we would identify.
That's semantically completely ridiculous. Like, if you try to make that type of statement in a program, like, it would crash, because you're saying what is XX is X. Like,
no, I'm saying femininity. I'm saying femininity.
Okay, and femininity. So a woman is someone who looks like a woman. Okay, so.
Well, no, femininity links to what a female does, not a woman.
Okay, and what does a female do?
Female does. What do you like? What does that mean? What does a female do?
Well, what could you do to resemble then a woman?
Carrying a purse, putting on makeup, different types of body language, different types of speaking patterns. There's a million different things that you can do to be more feminine.
So you're saying it's culture dependent?
Yes.
Okay, so you're currently doing something that females do. That's femininity.
Not just doing something. It's a concept, right? I can't just say, oh, this thing has a leg, therefore it's a chair. Can I? No. But a leg is something that's on a chair. I can't, that would be ridiculous. So just saying you have one aspect, you have one thing that is feminine does not make you a woman, but it is a overall concept of femininity that makes a woman.
Because I would say that a woman is a female, and then there's ways in which either men or women, males or females, behave in a certain society, and that society, if it is framed within Christianity, if it's a Christian society, then they would have Christian understandings of what a man is and what a woman is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing. But I don't see how a man, for example, having long hair, does that make him a woman or more
You're
like a woman?
The chair thing again.
Well, am I? Because
Yes,
if I,
you are.
if if a girlfriend sat in a man's her boyfriend's lap, does that make him more of a chair? No. But at the same time, how many things would you have to replicate in order to be considered a woman?
You said that you're a linguist by trade. You understand the idea of a chair, correct? You understand the conceptual idea that
Yes,
we cannot give a we cannot give it a strict definition.
Genus proximum differentia specifica and how they interact.
Right, and it's going to be more about like forms, and it's going to be more about archetypes and prototypes and those sorts of things. And so it's going to be the same with a woman. You're asking me to give you like when you stop being a man and start being a woman, or how many feminine characteristics you need to be a woman. And if you understand the chair concept, you understand that I cannot do that, yet you're asking it of me anyways.
But you're saying you can.
No, I'm not saying.
You're saying this person can become a woman.
Yes, I am saying they can become a woman based on a concept.
With the same problem that we have with chair or table or whatever, then you're saying it's unresolvable and therefore they can't. No one can become anything, in fact, if you go.
Are you saying that we cannot identify when something is a chair? Is that what you're actually telling me? No, we can. Yes.
And we can give it also function goes into it, right? A chair. If you have like a bar stool, it's not a really tiny table.
Yes.
It's a chair because it's meant to be sat on.
Exactly.
Right. That's its function. And of course, you can't break it down. You can't break it down fully into material or how many legs it's got, whether it's got like those armrests or whatever. I understand that. But we can identify a chair, and I'm saying, and in part by function. So how do we identify whether someone has become a woman?
Well, it's going to be the same based on utility. Like if I am basing this purely off of biology, but I can't look at anybody's biology, and I can't look at I can't look at their gametes. I can't look at their chromosomes. Most of the time, I'm not going to see their private parts. I'm going to see these other aspects. So we separate that from sex and say, now this is what we call gender. And gender is going to be conceptual. It's going to be femininity and masculinity. And we're going to use traits of femininity and masculinity to come up with the overall concept that is womanhood and manhood. So if I see somebody walking down the sidewalk that is in nylons and high heels, carrying a purse and a dress, long hair, I would call that person a woman, because that is what the utility of the word is only going to fit if I can address it. And two, they're going to fit the social roles of what a woman is. So it gives us that utility there.
But what if someone is wearing that for a gag?
Then I don't I think a woman, again, is going to be an overall concept. So like if they're wearing it one day, I would not say that person is a woman.
What if they're really committed, like Andy Kaufman levels of commitment, like they do it for months?
Then yeah, I would say over that time they are fulfilling the utility of a woman, yes.
But they don't consider themselves a woman.
I don't care what they consider themselves as. We're talking about a concept, not their self-identity.
And if a woman just doesn't really care about looks or something, they prefer short hair because it's more, I don't know, it's easier to deal with than long hair. They wear just whatever clothing. It happens to be male clothing or masculine clothing. Is that woman a woman or a man?
Normally, if they're not going to fit the concept of woman nor man, we would generally call them non-binary, because they don't fit either concept. They're in the gray area that would be between two concepts. Just like there's a spot between when a chair becomes a bench. We don't really have a name for this, but within gender we do. We call it non-binary.
So identification does not matter is also what you're saying.
Well, I said in the beginning that I'm not here to argue, for us to be more accepting of people. I'm here to argue the pragmatics of the words.
So you are more of a pragmatist. Pragmatics
I don't see how is very different than being a pragmatist. Pragmatics is how we come up with definitions.
All right. So for example, there are men who are men, identify as men, operate as men, but they have more like a more feminine face, what we would see more as a feminine face, like soft features, they've got big eyes, etc. That's still a man. And it's a male, because that's what I would categorize as being a man is. And the fact that they've got these anatomical features, that does not mean that they are now more in the woman camp, because now you would be tallying up the scores of how many feminine points they've got, as opposed to, because I simply do not see your logic there.
I know that
You're
you don't think that. I know you don't think that because you've already agreed that that is not what we would do with concepts. You've already agreed to this, yet you are tallying up characteristics.
You are
again.
doing so.
No, I am not. I am saying that it is conceptual and that we cannot do that. But
you're saying it's intuitive, basically, what you're saying.
I'm saying it's conceptual. Do you not understand what concepts are? It's a pattern.
Yes.
We recognize patterns. So what a woman does is what we call, or what a female does is what we call femininity. It means that we have recognized a pattern. Females are doing the similar things on a consistent basis. So we categorize that pattern as femininity. That's the label that we put on this pattern and on this categorization. So the pattern in and of itself is going to help us look at the concept and categorize it. But we cannot tally up characteristics and say, this is when it becomes a woman.
Okay, but, well, you can't. I can, because my criterion is that they're female.
But you're not going to, though. That's the thing, is that when you see somebody, as I described, that looks like a woman, you are going to call them a woman. Meaning that if you say, well, no, that just means I'm wrong.
I could be tricked into doing so.
Yes, exactly. Which means that now you've just lost utility within the word, that you would lose utility within the description of the word.
Well, no, just like a soldier, a sniper wearing camouflage, isn't actually grass. The fact that they're trying to trick me into thinking it is, grass or foliage or whatever.
You don't define
so that so they try to shoot me. That's the idea. That's the point.
You realize, again, you're doing it. Like, we're talking about the utility within the word, and now you're saying a soldier. Well, what is the utility in identifying a soldier? This is somebody who is actually working within the military. He's, out there probably performing some sort of position for war and things like that, right? That is the utility in labeling a soldier. It is not a conceptual thing.
But he's dressed as foliage.
We're talking about a conceptual thing.
But he's dressed as foliage.
It doesn't matter. It's not conceptual. So yes, you can be wrong about whether or not.
Conceptual. Again, if you're going to have enough time to investigate, you would realize it's not foliage. It's a soldier. So the fact that you cannot see someone's privates, again, that does not mean that they don't have those privates, and that should you be able to see them, that you wouldn't be able to identify.
Yes, whether or not you're going to be wrong is based on the definition, though. And the definition is based on how we use the word. And now you're saying, well, when I use the word, I could consistently be wrong all the time. Based on your definition, you could always be wrong and never know it. Whereas based on my definition, I would never be wrong as long as I'm using the patterns.
Okay, so because this is going now in a different topic, do we have anywhere in Christianity the idea that a woman is someone who, a male who acts as a woman or something, or the prohibitions of what men and women should do? Is it now breaking a prohibition? Like there is no male or female priesthood. So now if a woman starts doing it, like in the Catholic Church, they don't have beards most of the time, so a bit easier. But if it's like some wide-jawed woman, like a Dutch woman, that if they can pass, so to speak, and then they do it, is that now breaking Christian tradition? Or are you saying that because from the modern perspective, that we should be able to then conceptually say, well, only a man can do this, and because this person is doing that, that person is a man? Or I think
that you can define those roles based on sex. I think that you, like within the Christian tradition, they can define those roles based on sex, because when they were talking about it in the Bible, even though they used man and woman, and those words have become different things over time and didn't even exist in the English language the way that they do today.
Yes.
But
it wasn't even written in English.
Right,
So.
exactly. So they mean different things now, but when they used them, they were talking about sex. So we would assume that those roles are going to continue being defined based on sex and not on some sort of.
And that is what
idea.
Christianity says.
Which is
the topic of the
when
debate.
You're talking about the nunhood and or the nunnery and things like that. Yeah, of course. Like those roles are going to be defined based on the Christian tradition. But whether or not we identify somebody in a certain way is going to be based on how we use that word and what that word actually means.
Okay, so the Bible says, to sort of bring it up to date, our female and women are the same thing. So females are the only ones who should do the women things, and males are the only ones who should do men things,
okay,
or masculine things. Would we agree with that? That is the Christian position?
Yes.
But you sort of surrendered the point of the debate now.
No. Saying
that if only males should act masculine.
Saying that women should do this thing doesn't mean that they stop being a woman based on definition, right? So saying women should do things based on, like, we should separate females and males, okay? Cool. I get that. We agree on that. The Bible says this. But if somebody no longer does that, now you're saying, well, we cannot use the correct word to identify them because they shouldn't do that. But that's very different, saying we can't identify them with the correct word versus they shouldn't do this. So saying, like, well, a man should not have sex with another man. The Bible says this. Yes. Okay. Now we cannot call them gay. What? No. The word gay is what it is that we're labeling here, based on them having sex with another man. So you can still call them gay, even though they should not do this thing.
Yes, but that is the point of the debate. Christianity is against such things. So it's incompatible with Christianity.
Hold on. Maybe I'm confused. We're talking about whether or not people should, right now, we're talking about whether or not you should label somebody the word woman, right? You're saying I should not label them this because the Bible says they ought not do this. And I'm saying,
can you guys behave for like 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, good. I'll be right back. Go ahead.
And I'm saying, just as we're saying a man should not lay with another man, that does not mean that we cannot label him gay. That is very different.
But that would mean that type of behavior is against Christian teachings and norms, right?
Okay.
So it's incompatible with it.
I am. Hold on. You're doing this again. Right now we are talking about whether or not you should label the person with the word, right? The word woman. Okay. That is whether or not it is incompatible with Christian teachings on whether or not they should act that way or should dress that way or should fit that social norm is very different from whether or not we use the label to categorize them. Just as with a gay person, they lay with another man, that doesn't mean that we don't label them gay.
I see what you mean, where the disconnect was. So you agreed with my statement that Christianity says males do men things, females do women things.
Yes.
That's as caveman-y as we can make it.
Yeah.
Or cave woman-y, just to be clear. But that would mean that in Christianity, it is the biology is conditional.
It is conditional to what they ought to do.
To what they are. Ultimately, you cannot label someone a man or a woman unless they are the respective sex.
Right, but again, we're not talking about sex. We're talking about gender. The word has come to mean something different.
But it doesn't in Christianity.
Well,
so the fact that you could use a different framework, people have all sorts of subcultures. They use all sorts of words differently, which is okay, fine, as long as you say in the context of this subculture, right?
You're
Beth
saying
is
that the
used
Bible
as a
says
type of homosexual way of behaving and looking, etc. That does not mean that that person actually claims to be a bear, like the animal, but it does mean that it has a context within the subculture.
it does
So
on
within
what
Christianity,
ought to do, but it does not say that you ought not use the label for them. That is very different. You are saying that the actions are not permissible by the Christian church. Agreed. That I agree that the church says that they ought not do that. But now you're saying it's also saying I ought not categorize them as a woman, even though that before I'm arguing that a woman, based on how we come to definitions, is going to be very different from a female. And the Bible is talking about a female. You're just saying, well, now I can't use the correct word to categorize this person, but that's not what you're saying when you tell me what the Bible says. That's very different.
as much as words again are context dependent. If we're talking in the Christian context, those are synonyms. If you're talking about this now modern secular culture context, you use it differently.
The words didn't even exist when that was written, though. They translated them into modern. Go ahead.
But as they were updated, that original meaning did not change. Like the fact that I'm Serbian,
That's
right?
what I'm.
We don't have the word men or women, right? Other is actually vime, so that's a bit funny. But nevertheless, like the fact that I had it in Serbian does not mean that now in English that would change somehow the meaning. No, if it is used in the Bible that there is no disambiguation between sex and gender, Christianity does not recognize this disambiguation. And if you're arguing whether it's compatible with the Bible or with Christianity, that is what you have to show, not whether in the modern day, like we've invented all sorts of new words, like the Vatican used to do fun stuff like trying to come up with Latin equivalents of new words to translate into Latin. Well, they were very concerned with keeping Latin. They're not so much nowadays. But at the same time, we have updated maybe the exact form of the word, like werewolf or werewolf, as you would say in America.
Yes.
Like that does not mean someone who was a wolf. Like were was the word for man, right?
That's exactly where I'm about to go. Is that originally when we first had this in English, we called it a whiff, which is what a woman was. But eventually we called it a whiff man because we started to use the word man because that meant person at the time. Where meant, male, whiff meant female. Okay. Then as these words change, the Bible update we update what the Bible says in order to translate into how we use these words and what the definitions of these words are. And so I'm saying that even though we say you ought not act this way, that does not mean that the word does not mean this thing, that you cannot use that label now to categorize that thing. Just again, as we say, a man should not lay with another man, that does not mean that we say, therefore you cannot categorize him as gay, even though that's what the word gay means.
Okay, but like the word gay used to mean happy from French gay. And we have in certain translations of the Bible, like the coat of many colors that Joseph had, he was described as being dressed gaily.
Yes.
So does that mean now we consider him like being in like rollerblades and
no, that's my point. You're arguing my point again. That is what I'm saying, is that the words update over time, and that
but they don't change meaning.
But the word
we use to describe the meaning.
Exactly, the meaning does not.
Yes.
And so when we say woman, but even though the Bible says woman, it's no longer talking about what we're talking about. The Bible's talking about females. It's talking about female people, and so that is different. Saying, well, says that we can't call them female. No, it doesn't say that. It says that they should not act like a female. But when they act like a female, that is what we categorize as a woman. That doesn't mean that you can't call them a woman, even though they should not act that way. It does not mean that you cannot label them with the word woman, because the word woman means something different than what it meant when the Bible said it. The Bible was talking about a female.
But we're discussing. Okay, let's try to.
Here, let me ask you a question, a direct question.
Okay.
Where does it say you cannot call them a woman? How about that?
Well, exactly. Where does it say? Like, I could ask you, where does it say that female and woman are different things? We just don't have it.
Exactly.
So why would a modern word right now, even if you were to change it, but it has a context in Christianity, like if you want to call it a fake woman, and we say, okay, you can call them fake women or pretend women, right? Would that be acceptable?
Well, that's why earlier we were talking about how we come to definitions, because if the word is used to address how somebody looks and whether or not they fit the concept of womanhood and it's based on femininity, then that is how we use the word. Pragmatically, definitions come from how we use words pragmatically. And so if the definition is now a woman is one who is feminine or looks feminine, acts feminine, fulfills the womanhood role, then that is how we're using the word, meaning that the Bible, sorry, go ahead.
But then you're changing what the Bible was saying originally, because you're now creating this layer. But now you're creating this new layer to interpret what the Bible says in the context of the new.
I'm telling you that you need to take into the context that it is not talking about what I'm talking about. I'm saying that you.
Well, if you're not talking about it, then how? What does it have to do with the topic of whether Christianity accepts it or not?
Okay, we're talking about whether or not you should call a trans woman a woman, right?
Yes, that's what we're talking about within the Christian context.
Yes, and I'm saying that the Christian context does not say you do not call a woman, because if a woman no longer means female, then you would not be doing anything wrong there. It's not calling them a female. It is calling them somebody who's filling a role within society. Now, the Bible says that them filling that role is wrong, but that doesn't mean that you don't use the label to categorize it. Just as a man sleeping with another man is wrong, but that doesn't mean we don't use the word gay to label them or categorize them.
Okay, so where in Christianity does it say that that filling a role is now acceptable to call them that?
Well, it doesn't, but how we use a word.
You're being anachronistic is my problem.
No, you understand that with is how we used to say woman. You understand.
Yes.
That. Yes, you understand that with man eventually was then how we used to refer to a woman or a female. And then now we would say female instead of woman, and woman would mean something different. So the Bible doesn't have to say use this word or don't use this word, because we update the words based on how we use them anyways. It doesn't have to say that. We're already doing it.
But that does not mean, again, because the verbiage changed, yes, of course, but at the same time, now you're saying that because today we can say it's not male or female, even though the Bible uses them that way in the updated versions after the change has happened. That means that now Christians should call trans women. Even if we kept it as trans woman and not woman, to denote the fact that it's a male who is trying to fill a female role. So why would we drop the trans? Because that is how we Christians use the word, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm not saying we do. I'm saying I'm giving a hypothetical.
Yeah, I think that like within certain contexts, it makes sense to delineate the two if it's relevant, right? If it actually makes sense to delineate the two, if you are actually interacting with the biology, it makes sense to say, even though they're a woman, they're also a male, right? So you would say trans woman based on utility, based on context. Different words make sense in those scenarios. But if they are fitting the definition of woman anyways, then most of the time, normally, you're just going to call them a woman.
All right, guys, there's no great place to end a debate and move into the closing statements, but we've got a bunch of callers and we've got a bunch of super chats stacked up. I appreciate this very much tonight. It was very spirited and far more enjoyable than I thought it would be, considering how dull fucking Tom is. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm joking. I meant that for
True.
Posh. I meant that for Posh. Anyway, we're going to move right into the closing statements. Tomfoolery, as you were the one who opened first, I'm going to let you close or let Posh close first, so you have the last word. Posh, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for coming here and for discussing this cordially. I'm also very glad that it was much more cordial than I expected it to be. But I am also a very, very optimistic person. I think where we would still disagree is that just because that words accrue new meanings, that it is anachronistic to then say that we can create a different category for the way it was used back then. In the Bible, you are what you are, and then you have duties commensurate with what you are. If you're a man, you have these duties. If you're a woman, you have these duties, and you are to fulfill them. And you can succeed or fail in doing so. But that is why I simply do not accept the divorce between gender and sex as we are using them today, not because of any etymological reason, but because of logical reasons. So the Christian tradition is very clear. We never had this idea that if a monk should shave his beard and then put on headwear, that he can now be a nun. We don't have the idea that if a woman is starts going to bar fights, that now she's a man so she can be a priest. And I understand where Tom is coming a bit from, where this conditional would kick in. I'm saying there's no point at which it doesn't kick in as far as how we use the word is concerned, because it is context dependent, and the Bible was written over quite a while, and in none of those times do we have this disambiguation. So I'm saying it is an act of innovationism to then say, well, now we have this different way we use it today. So because we've divorced it from the way it is used, I'm saying that's now adding to what the Bible is saying, to say that there's this empty spot that can be filled. That could also then infinitely go into a loop of how many things you can add on. There's the superwoman who does only these particular things, for example, and there's nowhere in the Bible that it says there's no superwoman. So that is where I believe the problem lies. Also, I will mention again, scriptures, writings of the church fathers, and statements of the church councils have addressed a lot of things. Nowhere do we find this, and I believe, again, it is anachronistic. But again, I think it was a very pleasant exchange. Thank you.
And Tomfoolery, go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I appreciate you inviting me, Andrew. I appreciate Posh, the conversation. So you talked about duties. Duties in the Bible are based on being a female, and it is saying that you ought to do these duties or fulfill these roles based on your sex. And I'm saying that, yes, you can fulfill those roles while also being a female, but there are other roles that you ought not to do that we would still categorize as being a woman, or that would fall into womanhood based on how we use the words. We do agree that the words in the Bible update over time based on how we use these pragmatically and how we come to definitions. And so even though we would say you ought not to do this, that doesn't mean that we would say you ought not to label it this way. Just as being gay, you ought not to lay with a man, that doesn't mean that we would say you ought not to label them gay, even though that separates them from somebody straight. We wouldn't say, well, no, you just have to keep calling the gay guy straight, because they're not supposed to lay with another man. Nobody would say that, because we understand gay is actually communicating that they are doing the thing. Concepts are pretty simple. I Like just as we talked about a chair, you cannot just like give a simple definition of what a chair is because it is conceptual. Sometimes a beanbag is a chair. Sometimes you walk into a place and it's this big round like egg looking thing. We would call it a chair. Sometimes it's the same exact shape, but it's behind like ropes in a museum and now it's art. Even though it looks similar to what we would call a chair, it doesn't fulfill the roles or the utility that we would use for a chair. So we would stop calling it a chair in that case. So we can't have simple or rigid lines drawn around concepts. They are used based on patterns, and they are fairly subjective to where we all get into gray areas where we start arguing whether or not that is this thing or is not this thing. Just as within gender, we use masculinity and femininity. And there's a gray area in the middle in between these two things where we would call it non-binary. It doesn't mean that gender is not binary. It is still binary. It just means that conceptually, these people do not fit within the binary. But it is still binary because it's based on being a female or a male. It's based on traits that we would expect of those two sexes. So it is still a binary. It's just there are some people that we would categorize in the gray area as non-binary. Medical advancements have made it to where we've changed a lot of expectations within Christianity. Things that were forbidden before are no longer forbidden now. And it's because we understood the utility of those medical advancements. And we understood that that allowing people to do certain things actually gave them more of an ability to go to church, more of an ability to interact within society, more of an ability to pray clear-headedly, or more of an ability to read the Bible and understand it more. This would be similar with trans people, where if they are clear-headed and capable of interacting within society more because they have less dysphoria, this would give the church the same utility as it did with all other medical advancements that they used to deny in the past. I feel like these are simple linguistic concepts that are pretty easy to understand, and even dogmatic Christians who are very strong-headed in their beliefs would at least agree to the way that we define these words and the way that we understand the concepts. And I feel like they were presented pretty simply here today. Thank you.
Thank you for that closing statement, Tom. Just to do some meta satire, some satire within satire, I'm going to make fun of myself the same way that Jim Bob often does. So we do things a little bit differently here on the Crucible. Now that the fucking debate is closed, we're going to move over into audience participation. So that means callers can call in and the moderator can participate with questions of his own. And that's what that fucking means. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, I had a couple of questions for both of you before we move over to the callers. Try to keep it very brief because we have a full deck tonight. First for you, Posh. Tom's consistency argument for lithium, I don't feel like that got answered very well. Does Christianity allow for lithium? And if so, when did that get ingrained into the tradition?
I cannot give an answer for lithium specifically. I'm not that familiar with how that would be treated. So I expanded it to these mind-altering things in general, and painkillers and types of opiates would definitely fall into that category. So I said that it can be on a case-by-case basis, as much as, maybe the church would be fine with someone who suffers a lot of pain from a chronic illness taking them. Is not the same thing as, I stubbed my toe or something, and then you can take painkillers all you want or something. So as I said, if it has a medical purpose and if it has the blessing of a church statement or even an official personally approving it, that's a different thing from trying to create this general law about it, as much as being, sad does not mean you cannot just, take handfuls of
right. But to follow up, to be totally fair here, Posh, that was kind of the crux of his argument, was to say, if this is true, what happens if a modern church official goes ahead and allows the transition because they think that that's going to be the best prescription for the person?
Well, because we don't have anything in the tradition that has ever approved of such things, this person in the church would have to, of course, make an argument from tradition to show where we can draw this from, and also have the approval of the other bishops or priests or whatever it is, because it is, again, not just this individual. It's not like a judge making a decision. These things can also then be challenged by other church officials, like it does with heresy. In fact, the fact that some bishop becomes a heresiarch does not mean that now that's okay, but we have to deal with it in the best way that we can, and that is going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Thank you for that. Tom, for you, you said we can't give all the characteristics of a chair, and I would agree that that's true, but while maybe we can't give a perfect definition of what a chair is, we definitely know what it isn't. We know exactly what a chair is not. Why can't I use that same application with women? I definitely know what a woman is not.
Well, a woman is going to be, again, based on how we use the word. So when I'm saying,
yeah, right. No, I understand, but I'm saying these aren't women, right? And maybe I can't give a perfect definiendum of what one is, just like a chair, but I can definitely tell you what one isn't, right?
I'm not the one asking for somebody to give a perfect definition. That was him. I'm saying that we cannot give a perfect definition, and that we can use what is not based on a spectrum where we see masculinity exists. Yes, we know masculinity is not feminine. Therefore, that is not going to fall under the concept of womanhood.
So then if the vast majority of trans people I run into don't fall under that categorization, why can't I say they're not women?
You can.
And should, right?
Yeah, I would say if they do not look feminine and they do not look like a woman, then most of the time we would say that they are not women.
And that would relate to the vast majority who currently exist.
I don't know if that's true, but based on pragmatic usage of language, that would make sense.
Okay. The second thing is you spend a lot of time talking about the definiendum of the word, but you seem to have forgotten about the definien, or the grouping of words which relate to the word. The grouping of those words must correlate. And which words do you think correlate with woman? Like if you had to think of the words that were necessary to capture the essence of the definiendum, aren't they all female in relation?
Yeah, I used female to connect femininity. So a woman is one who is feminine. Femininity is what a female does. So of course.
So then if that's true, then we are pretty sure what a woman is then, just based on the definition, that it's basically in relation to female.
Well, it is. Yes, it is in relation to female. Yes.
But that's like the whole core grouping for what the word is in the definition. I mean, that's the whole core group. So the definition has two parts, the definiendum and then the definition. The definiendum is what you're focusing on, which is to give it like almost an empty label without conveyance. Like a woman is who a woman is who a woman is. Fine. You can give, I'm not saying you are. Okay. I'm saying you're trying to give some type of specific criteria, but we already have it. That's what a definition is. It's to limit the expansion of the definition. And if all the core groupings that are underneath that word are in correlation essentially to female, what do you think they were trying to convey with the word?
You're talking about like intent versus pragmatics, and the pragmatics are how we come to the definition, though. And so if we are using the word woman to if we're labeling people who are feminine woman, and if we're being tricked over and over and over, eventually we just lose utility in the word woman. Whereas if we are basing it on femininity and we're calling everybody who looks feminine a woman, then that is the utility of the word, is to convey femininity.
But if we know what it's not, which we do, and we know what it's supposed to be, which we do, we're not losing any utility. Well, I'll explain it really simply. We know what a chair isn't. You and I agree that that's true. So therefore we know what a woman isn't. Would you agree that that's true?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we agree that that's true, we also know what a definition is. And we know that that grouping is telling us what a woman is. So we do know what the limits and bounds of woman is, and we know what it's not. This seems to indicate female. I don't see where the problem is. You know what I mean?
It connecting to a female does not mean that it is a female. Those are different things. We can use a woman to understand what a female is, we can use female to understand what a woman is without them meaning the same thing. I know that like lions have fur, and likely if it doesn't have fur, it's likely not a lion, but that doesn't mean fur and lion are now the same thing.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the clarification. I did have a favor. A longtime chatter asked me if I would do. Will you humor me, Tom? Close your eyes, put your hands up like this. Okay, that way I know you're not Googling. Can you tell me what the scientific method is?
You're talking about like hypothesis. I can't remember all of it, but
okay. He just wanted to know if it's just kind of an inside thing, but I appreciate the answer very much. I'm going to move over to callers. Mello, you owe me $20 for that, by the way. You owe me 20 fucking bucks for that piece of shit. All right. We're going to start with Peacecraft. Peacecraft, can you hear me okay? You've been waiting very patiently in the lobby.
And Andrew, I'm going to require a lot of time with this one to put Tom in a box. But before I start, Tom, if you just got done saying that if a person is tricked by a trans individual a repeatable amount of times, that eventually the utility of your language changes to include that woman. If I make human shit into a chocolate bar and I trick you with it 1,000,000 times, does that make human shit delicious Ferrero Rocher?
No.
Okay, cool. All right. The reason your lithium to transition analogy is disanalogous and why you were incorrectly accusing Posh Redneck of a whataboutism is because it's disanalogous from the jump. Because of that, I can quote both the Bible and I can quote the College of Cardinals, which might offend some of our Orthodox friends here. But hey, I got to go with the Catholics on this one. Genesis 1:27 here is, see, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and with every tree with seed in its fruit, you shall have them for food. And essentially these 4 chapters, of which I won't quote the rest, God creates the heavens and the earth according to law and gives man dominion over the natural properties of the world. In quoting the College of Cardinals and the College of Bishops, these bishops note that modern technology offers chemical, surgical, and genetic interventions for the functioning of the human body, as well as modifying its appearance. There are 2 scenarios, they said, whereby technological interventions can be morally justified: when they are aimed at repairing a defect in the body or sacrificing a part of the body for sake of the whole, such as with amputation. These kind of interventions respect the fundamental order and finality inherent in the human form. However, gender transition surgeries regard this order as unsatisfactory in some way and proposes a more desirable order, a redesigned order, and is thus not morally permissible. All right. 2, the utility of language is not.
Let him respond. You're going to have to either tie this up quick or let him respond to one point at a time.
Sorry, Tom. Did quoting the Bible and quoting the colleges of the Cardinals fucking clarify that disconnect that you couldn't put together yourself in your question to Posh Redneck?
No, not at all. Them just saying this does not satisfy us does not mean that in reality it wouldn't be analogous to the other things. Also, do you actually think the chocolate bar and the shit is analogous to?
That was your own analogy. That was your own analogy. But I'll get to your misunderstanding of Derrida soon.
How is that my own analogy?
You just answered it with Andrew. I don't know if you're drunk or high.
No, it's not. Hold on. We talked about earlier the military guy, right? The way that we use the word is based on the utility of the word. You're taking 2 completely different types of words that have different utility to them, and then trying to analogize this to what it is. I'm not going
to let you embarrass yourself. It would be cruel of me to do so. But what you can fucking do is rewind the VOD. Rewind the VOD about 20 seconds before I joined in, and you'll see yourself use the exact fucking analogy, you utter dumb fuck.
How?
Because you said those words, you fucking idiot.
I said shit and chocolate bar. That's what you're saying.
You said that the act of perceiving a thing enough times in a row transforms it into the thing that you are perceiving. You fucking idiot.
Okay, yeah, not in and of itself, but I've already made the arguments ahead of time.
I'll get to your misunderstanding.
Let him respond, caller.
Sorry,
you have to take that into context with everything that I've already laid in front of it. So you're asking me to add that on to everything else that I've already said. I assumed that you were here listening when I explained utility of words, how we come to definitions, and how we change words over time. that you can't just like ignore everything else that I've already said and just get me on this little gotcha that ignores everything else that I've explained before.
Oh, don't worry, Tom. I didn't ignore. I very much
I'm not
noted your
worried so far based on talking to you. I'm not worried at all.
very much understood your misapprehension of both of Wittgenstein and Derrida, and that's in my following questions.
Okay.
The utility of language is not for inclusion, but to accurately assess the reality of the material world. If you grant that males cannot become females,
I said it's not for inclusion.
Okay, well, you did. You did several times. You may have Mott and Bailey'd it through the conversation with Posh, but I caught it, right? If you grant that males can't become females and that femininity or womanhood, what we are describing as inherent to the adult human female, is immutable, where the fuck are you deriving this utility?
I don't agree with the second part. I don't agree that it's inherent or immutable to have femininity.
You don't.
No.
So what produces it?
Well, it's a pattern that we've categorized.
What generates the pattern, Tom?
All sorts of things. Social norms. Some of it is biological. Some of it is just forced upon us. There's all sorts of things.
Oh, so I mean, if you're going to pick a number, how much would you say it's biological that women wear bras because they have tits?
Wait, what the number?
Yeah, if wearing a bra is a social construction based around gender expression and femininity, how much of that is driven by the biological fact that women have tits?
I would say probably all of it.
Oh, that's fucking crazy. All right, question 3.
Wait, hold on. Do you not have a point? Are you too retarded to actually make a point here?
I made a point so
you
profound.
Didn't. You said one thing. What you said, one thing is biological. I said some of it's biological as well. So now all you're saying is, hey, Tom, you're right. Some of it's biological. Thank you.
Okay,
That's
so
it.
in your
how
concept...
much of a woman carrying a purse is biological, Peacecraft?
Well, if the woman is carrying
shut the fuck
no,
up.
I'll answer. If a woman is carrying a purse
also,
to fill their purse with feminine...
Hang on. We've gotten into it so much that I got to untangle it a little bit. Peacecraft, go ahead.
If a woman is carrying a purse because it's filled with feminine hygiene products, I would say that carrying a purse probably has a biological imperative, Tom, unless the women in your life are those special kind of women that don't need pans or tampons.
Okay, so men can carry masculine things too. So what?
And what would drive them to carry masculine things, Tom?
The necessity for it.
And what is driving that necessity, Tom?
Their want.
And why do they want it, Tom?
Because they feel like wanting it.
And why do they feel like wanting it, Tom?
That's the end of it. They feel like wanting it.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, cool.
You don't have to have feminine hygiene products. Do you disagree with that? Do you think you need them?
I mean, sure. I mean, we'd probably have to spend a lot more money on fucking Tide detergent, but we could live in that fucking world.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like a biological imperative that they have to have these things.
So it's almost like the utility
that carry around that are masculine things that you wouldn't say are biological imperatives either, and I could put them into a purse and carry them around.
Okay, question 3.
This is the last.
Andrew, you've got. I'll be shorter in the next one. I have to hammer him here.
Then just move to the next one because we've got a bunch of callers.
All right. I will spit these out, Tom, and you can respond as you feel. Just get out a notepad really quick, but I will spit this out for Andrew. 3, if you are arguing for harm prevention in your utility, do you advocate the use of chemotherapy with cancer patients? Ought someone with cancer who has defined their persona as being a cancer battler be rational, cogent, and sound to deny a treatment that would remove their cancer because they preferred the social status of somebody battling cancer? We see this in far as people that get love and affirmation and support battling cancer. Question 4, and please respond when I'm done. If you are arguing for settled science in the current era, bypassing the debate of cogency and a Christian ethic, why are you out of date? Both the Tavistock Clinic and the NHS have disallowed transitioning individuals, with public guidance to general practitioners to not affirm the gender identity of those questioning, citing the virality of other dysphoria. How, as a utilitarian, are you coming to the conclusion that affirming one individual to the statistical detriment of X+1 individuals is the greatest measure of utility? If measuring utility and harm, why do you discount Posh's mental disturbance and mental harm in being socially pressured to affirm? If normative humans comprise 99.8% of humans, and trans individuals with this distress comprise 0.0018% of individuals, what calculus did you come to say this small minority's harm was greater than the overwhelming majority? In your assumptive claims that we don't check gender or gametes or any of the other conditions you listed, the reality is that you do assume, and you do assume correctly 99% of the time. Even recent discoveries in algorithm identification, built by human hands and guided by human metrics and human inputs, raises this identification even higher. In short, you quoted Butler incorrectly. You've quoted Wittgenstein incorrectly. Let me finish, please.
No,
I know.
You're lying. I haven't quoted any of them.
Yes, you did quote Butler's gender performativity theory, and you did quote Wittgenstein and Derrida in the construction of language. Oh, then you're too stupid to know the fucking theory you're quoting.
No,
now you got to let him respond, caller.
I'm almost done.
Then finish quickly, very quickly.
You've played name the trait in ignoring cluster trait grouping. You've appealed to exceptions, ignoring the rules that define the exceptions. You've misunderstood Derrida. In quoting Derrida in the subject of forms, you cannot know water by experience. By describing it, you can only experience it. But as you've delineated that men cannot become women, trans women cannot ever generatively know what it is to be a woman. They can only know the generative experience of what it is to be a trans woman, and even more accurately, the experience of dysphoria. You copied your argument from Vosh. You did it badly, and I want everyone in chat to throw cans of appreciation at you. Cans of appreciation for the person who plagiarized an argument badly.
You're just going on a gish gallop lie of
all right. He's done. He's done, Tom. You got plenty of time to respond. I promise. Go ahead.
Okay, literally everything he said is wrong. I didn't quote Derrida. I didn't quote Butler. Vosh got his freaking argument from me and misquotes me, and he's completely wrong on how he comes to these conclusions. I didn't use any of these. I didn't do name the trait. He said name the trait. I said I cannot name the trait. I didn't say it's settled science. I said it's not settled science. You're naming places like Tavistock that got shut down. You're naming two small places when I'm talking about an overall consensus.
The NHS is a small place?
Hold on. There is a consensus that people should transition if they have gender dysphoria. I never discounted that there is social pressure for people to get gender dysphoria or to transition even if they don't have gender dysphoria. Can you show
me the p-values, k-value?
Hold on, you're making all this crap up. Admit that you are just lying and making up a bunch of crap so that you can trap me in a box of stuff that I never said. Just admit that.
I'm not lying.
I never said that crap. You can go back into the tape. I never mentioned Butler. I never mentioned Derrida. I never said I can name the trait. I said I cannot name the trait. You are making all of this up. You made all of that up.
Tom.
My argument is completely different from Vosh's because he just says, oh, well, we can just change things based on where it is. No, I'm saying it links to something real and biological.
Tom, do you know who came up with gender performativity theory?
It doesn't matter. It does not matter. I did not make those arguments. I am making an argument of fact, whereas they are making arguments of theory. This is very different.
Do you know? Just can you answer me really quick? Who came up with gender performativity theory? The main crux of the first part of your. Thank you, buddy. And do you know? And do you know who came up with your arguments about the utility of language that you misunderstood?
Derrida. It doesn't matter.
Oh, man, that's fucking crazy.
It doesn't matter. Man. I'm not quoting them. I'm quoting
you are. You just don't know that you are.
No, you're saying that because they came up with it, I am now quoting them, and I'm not. Just because somebody says, "Oh, we're going to call this grass," now every time I call it grass, I'm quoting them.
If I said E equals mc squared, and you told me that was Einstein's theory of relativity, and I said, "Well, I didn't know that. I'm not referencing Einstein at all." You'd call me
no, you're not referencing
idiot.
Einstein. You're referencing a fact. You are retarded, dude. You are so stupid. You don't even know how to use the words. You are not quoting them. You are stating a fact.
I've tried to fucking hammer your armor of retardation, and I think it's time that other callers might give it a shot.
Well done.
Right. Thank you so much. Peace.
Oh wait, one quick one for Posh. Posh, if I showed up to your Orthodox church and I said, "Hey guys, I got fucking dysphoria. It fucking sucks, but I really want to be a Christian. I'm going to work on this dysphoria thing and try to approach it with a Christian ethic, even though I think I'm a woman. Can I just come down and jam as long as I follow the rules?" Would your church fathers or whatever the fucking Greek words you said be down with that?
Yeah.
Yes, because if we believe you have a problem where we would want you to be is the church, where there is healing and there is the Holy Spirit and everything of that nature. That is where we should want you to be. Saint John Chrysostom says the church is a hospital, not a courthouse.
Thank you, Posh. I'm glad that in one fucking question we solved the fucking question, or solved the premise of the debate, that you could be transgender and a Christian. Thanks, boys. Tom, go fuck yourself.
All right, Peacecraft, have a nice night. Holy shit. All right.
Just one more thing.
Go
also,
ahead.
when he was quoting, when he was talking about the NHS and Tavistock, all they did is said that they shouldn't allow children to transition. They do not say that you shouldn't transition anymore. He just made that up as well. So, yeah, I will do a compilation of all the lies when you can go back and watch me say very different things from what it is that he's saying I'm said. It's going to be fun.
Okay, man. No problem. Machine lies. I see you stuffing your face. That's why I put you on the spot just like that, you know? Yeah, there you go. There you go. Go ahead. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Your mic's not working, buddy.
Got nothing. No, nothing. Oh, shit. Well, look, I'm going to put you in the background for right now. Get to the next caller. See if you can get that mic working. All right. Aircraft Spark, you've been waiting patiently in the background. Thank you so much. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So before I actually start, I got to ask both people: can you be homo? We've already heard about transgender from the posh point of view. Let's add homosexual. Can you be an actual active homosexual and be a Christian from both colors?
Yeah, I would say yeah, as long as like you've become a Christian and you've accepted Jesus into your heart and Savior. That's how I would define Christian. So, of course.
Could you be, well, you would, practicing, you said, right?
Yes. I mean,
not practicing isn't falling into it every so often, but actively, seeking it out, with thinking it's not a problem.
So my only pushback with that is, are you without sin, Posh?
No.
Okay. So you can actually, weakness of the flesh is still a weakness. It's still, sins of the flesh, yes, are real. I believe that you can actually be homosexual and trying to live a more godly and Christ-like life, but occasionally slipping up. I mean, drug addicts could even be Christian. They may not be the best Christians, but they could still be Christian nonetheless. Would you agree with that?
We would say you were not living a Christian life. And if, again, someone commits adultery, that is also a massive sin.
Yes.
So that person having sinned does not make them a non-Christian, but they're not living a Christian life. They're not living a life of repentance if they don't stop it. So if this is something that they really struggle with and fail every so often, that is one thing. But you can't be affirming it and saying it's acceptable, normal, or whatever, and consider yourself a Christian, because you're breaking from biblical and church teachings.
Based in Christ build. All right.
Are you saying that you can't do something wrong and be a Christian?
No, he's not saying that.
No,
maybe that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So the way I took it is, you can make those mistakes just as long as they're not intentional, and you try to better yourself at a daily and constant pace. Mistakes can happen, and you could still be Christian. I wanted that clarification. Really.
Aircraft
yes,
Spark,
sir.
I got to ask you a question though.
Mm-hmm.
Does this statement make any sense to you? I accidentally keep cheating on my wife.
No, it doesn't. Not at all.
So I just, through no fault of my own, sometimes I just slip into cheating on my wife.
You just walking around and just fall right in, huh?
Yeah, just like, does that even make sense, really?
No, it really doesn't. But to be fair, I mean, we've all sinned, fallen short, and we all have our vices. Andrew, me and you both share one. We smoke, which is,
I don't consider that a vice. I consider it necessary to deal with the
yeah,
massive quantity of degenerates that I have to deal with in order to maintain my sanity. But anyway,
I mean, that's where I was about to go with it. Is I was a heroin addict for a long time, and I was a thief. But I wouldn't have said that I lost my Christianity because I was doing these things. Like, what separates humans from being godlike is that we are sinners. We're going to sin. We will continue sinning, and repeating a sin wouldn't make you any less of a Christian either. It's whether or not you have actually. I mean, I understand that there's like an argument on this, but from where I came from, it was about whether or not you've gotten saved, not whether or not like the church decided that you're going to go to heaven.
Fair. This would go into the soteriological views that we have in the Eastern Orthodox Church versus the once saved, or we say not, but sola fide and all of those things. That I wouldn't go into that. But the gray area could be to link it back again to adultery. It's one thing, like you had a huge fight with your wife, you go into the bar, get drunk, and then things happen there with some other woman. That's one thing versus going, woo, adultery, yeah. So that can be the difference. So neither one is good, but the first one is something you've slipped up. You should try to repair the damage done by such an action. But if you go around affirming it, that's a completely different thing.
Yes. Okay. So one thing that you mentioned, Tom, is talking about characteristics of what a woman is, what is acceptable in society, and things like that. And those who are showing are pushing forward those characteristics, those are people who should be considered a woman. Would that be a decent summation of how you view it?
Kind of. I'm saying that the way that we use the word woman is how we would define the word woman. Yeah.
Is Buck Angel a woman?
No.
Buck Angel is in fact a woman. In fact, Buck Angel will tell you that she is a woman. She will say that she's a transsexual man. But
I don't care about self-ID. Like, that's not how we use a word, right?
Okay. So if you were to paint your face dark brown, get a nice close haircut, dance a soft shoe, and watch the Jeffersons, would that make you black?
Again, it depends on how we define these words and the utility of them. So if we're saying like you're black based on your lineage and based on like where you come from geographically, then it wouldn't communicate that anymore.
What if you could sing all the lyrics to every Kanye song? Would that make you black? I'm trying to find out, because you're saying that pushing forward characteristics and norms of a certain sex can make you that not necessarily the sex, but the gender of such. Can we do that with race?
Well, so again, I'm saying that there are some things that communicate something, and based on what it is that you're communicating is going to help you come up with a definition for the word, and the definition will answer that question for you. So like a female, I feel like will stay pretty consistent because it's a scientific word that's going to communicate the same thing no matter what. Whereas woman is more of a like socially used word to communicate some sort of social role, and so that will change over time.
So black is actually a socially
hang on
as well.
Aircraft Sparky, you got to wrap it up here. We've got a bunch of callers behind you.
Yes, sir.
Do you have anything else you need to wrap this up with?
It's just weird that it's completely fine that we can sit there and claim that someone of the opposite sex happens to be of a different gender. Look, there is definitely a gender binary. You actually admitted to it, Tomfoolery. Even those who claim that are non-binary, they just prove that there is a binary. There is binary and non-binary. Right. That's two. That's all there is. But in reality, the deal is it doesn't matter how you present yourself. Okay, you can't as a Caucasian become black. You cannot become Asian as a Caucasian. You can't change who and what you are. Now, you may put on a mask. Just because you put on an anthropomorphic suit doesn't mean that you're, Greyhound Foxworthy of the clan Lick My Balls. It doesn't make you more of a degenerate or more or less of a degenerate. You can't be that furry you pretend to be. And these men walking around a woman's face and these women trying to be men, no, it's a trap. In fact, I think that's why they're called that. Thank you.
Can I ask Aircraft Sparky a question?
Mm-hmm.
Can Sisters of Battle become Space Marines?
Fuck no.
The Emperor protects.
The Emperor. So
The
did
Emperor abides.
Did you just do fucking Warhammer lore?
Yes.
On
Yes,
this
we
shit?
did.
Get the
Well,
fuck
I
outta
saw
here.
the seals.
The fuck out of Get the fuck out of here with this Warhammer shit. These
Nerd
fucking
stuff.
people. All right. Machine Lies. Do you got your mic working now, brother?
Hello, friends. Can everyone hear me?
Good.
Hey,
I can hear you. Go ahead.
how's it going? Hey, Posh, what's going on, brother, man? I've talked to you one time before on Jim Bob's show, and then I got kicked off for being repetitive or whatever. But tomfoolery. I like your style. But I just want to wonder, like, what in the hell? How do you ground your justification for transgenderism inside the Bible? Now, I've looked at these verses hard, and I'm trying to contemplate any way possible that I could take the verses of the Bible and apply them either directly or indirectly to your argument. So I will attempt to do that for for Posh Redneck here, you know?
Well, so I'm not saying that there's justification for transgenderism in the Bible. What I'm saying is that whether or not we call someone a woman isn't going to be based on what the Bible says. So if the Bible says the sky is blue, but over time we start calling the sky green, after a while that's what it's communicating. It's communicating the color. And so it's communicating a pattern that we've recognized of a color. And so we would just start calling the sky green, and the Bible would switch to say the sky is green now instead of continuing.
But no, the Bible wouldn't automatically switch because the Bible is based on traditions. You know, unless those traditions themselves are in some sense progressive, you know, then they wouldn't really change. And then you can go to some sense in which Paul's messages are progressive. So if you would attempt me to try to do that, to try to maybe help you out there.
Try to power through though.
Oh yeah. It's literally like 3 verses I got. You mean, right? And they're not very helpful because, as I said, I don't think you have a very good argument here.
I just want to say it's not all based on tradition.
Over time.
The words did change in the Bible, and they didn't change or they didn't stay the same because of tradition. They changed because it matters what the Bible is communicating. The Bible wants to communicate something to you that you will understand, and you will understand it based on the language. And
I don't think you could just magically change those definitions.
I can give you a bunch of words where it has changed, and the Bible changed
about these Bible verses real quick, if you guys don't mind.
Okay.
Mr. Tom. Okay. So the first verse is so first I want to say that that the Jews had this tradition where you wake up every morning and you pray that you thank God that you're not born a woman or a goy. So that is like a thing where you go back to you thank God that you're not born of the nations or a woman, saying that that you thank God that God made you higher of a higher status as a man. Now, if you continue this to the Bible, in the New Testament, Paul seems to affirm the hierarchy between I guess God on top, men, and then women, and then children. So he affirms this hierarchy, but then he points to women leadership within the church. He mentions Phoebe and Chloe. He also says he also changes the restrictions on marriage. He says that it's better to remain unmarried, as Paul is. He says it's better to remain single as myself, unless you want to fulfill your lusts, then find a woman for marriage. So does the Bible actually because Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And I just wonder what you think of that. Isn't it true that he's changing a little bit from the progressive? He's moving the goalposts a little bit, and also he's bringing in this doctrine of inclusivity. Would you like to respond to that?
I'm not.
No. I was asking Posh.
Oh.
Well, not now. We talked about having a poll debate. If you want to set that up, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that, even within the context in which he is talking about marriage, it's a whole different thing. He also says that he has a right to take a wife, but that for his calling, that is not appropriate. But and yes, that verse is taken by, for example, Catholics to say that not being married is superior to being married. But
Yes.
again, that's going to be a completely different debate, I'm afraid.
Okay. Yeah, and I'd be happy to have that debate with you. But on another instance, now I could point to another instance where in 22:30 in Matthew, I think, Jesus says that we're gonna be in heaven as we are as the angels, unmarried. When the Pharisees ask him about the 7 women, you know what I'm talking about. So what about that? Because in heaven, it seems like Jesus is saying that in heaven you're like sexless.
Yes.
Like something. Yeah. So like you know, and then Paul points to in New Corinthians.
No virgins for the suicide bombing for us, brother.
No 10,000 pearly white boys who do not bleed. I'm sorry.
Well, that's too bad. Well, that's too bad for you. You get your sexless heaven.
Well, so be it.
It's all good, but all
right. Machine Lies. I gotta wrap it there.
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much. Also, Machine Lies. You can catch his channel. I'll get it linked down if he sends it over to me. He actually made a video recently that has his appearances on the Crucible. I went and watched it today, and it was just a bunch of his fucking grandstanding, but it was kind of funny. So I recommend you check it out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, there's only 100 views on that video, so if anybody wants to watch it, I'll definitely appreciate that.
Well, have a good day, man. Appreciate it very much. Fresh Pelmani, you're on. Go ahead with your questions.
You're muted.
Fresh Pelmani, are you there?
Sorry, just give me a second.
Don't tell me what to do.
Sorry, I asked you in chat Andrew to give me a moment.
Are you good now?
Give me 10 seconds. Very sorry about that, gentlemen. Can you hear me?
You're good. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, okay. So, Tom, you kept saying that the reason why we were using this specific definition of woman is because of the pragmatic reasons for doing so. It seems to me that it's not actually pragmatic at all, and I'd like to go through a series of questions with you to sort of explore why that might not be the case. So my first question is, are all trans women women?
Are all trans women women?
Yes. So before you made the comment that you're saying that a trans woman is a woman, I presume by that you mean all trans women are women.
No, I'm saying a trans woman can be a woman.
Okay, a trans woman can be a woman because the definition you're using for woman is the social definition, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it fits into a certain series of social categories which we define as being womanly or being feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What makes a trans person?
I would assume somebody who's transitioned.
Transitioned in what sense?
From one gender to another or one sex to another.
So, but what does it mean to go through that? Do you mean sort of social transition? Do you mean surgery? Do you mean?
Yeah, it would mean different things. But yeah, I would like if we're talking about transgender, or meaning like they transitioned their appearance and their gender, then yeah, I would say they're transitioning the way.
Okay, so if they've changed their appearance and their gender, and you've already defined gender as a social category, then all trans women are women.
Yeah, I would assume if they've transitioned. The problem is that like what some people would call
you bake that into the definitional cake just then, though.
Kind of. I would say that what some people call a trans woman, I might disagree with them on whether or not they've actually transitioned. So it's hard to say that, like, you know, them making an effort at transitioning means that they've actually transitioned to the point where we would actually call them a woman. This is what BPF asked earlier. Like, if they still look masculine, would we call them a woman? And I'm probably not.
So, okay, but why? Okay, well, let me sort of go the peacecraft angle for a moment and ask the question of why is that person going to the effort of transitioning?
Normally because of gender dysphoria. If they're doing it for other reasons, it'd probably be obnoxious.
Okay, so they're either being obnoxious with it, in which case we shouldn't actually call them women, or it wouldn't be useful to do so because it would just be basically serving their self-interests, or they have gender dysphoria in that circumstance. So if they have gender dysphoria, should we be calling them a woman? Because based on what you said throughout your discussion earlier, you said the reason for why we're actually doing so, or the main pragmatic utility for doing so, is because of the medicalized reasons behind it.
So there's
To
two
reduce
different
suicide,
arguments for
correct?
this. So one is like a pragmatic aspect. The other one, we're talking about like doing something based on a medical prescription that I would assume probably has some sort of moral connotation to it as well. But it's more so saying like this is what's best for that individual. But that's different than saying they are a woman versus whether or not you call them a woman.
So okay, so but the whole, but I presume that part of the transitioning process is only necessitated by. So the only reason that we're arguing about the pragmatics in the first place is because of that prescription, right? It's because we have recognized, like the only reason why that social usage has come into place is because people are suggesting that to not do so would result in more trans suicides.
So normally when I have this conversation, it has absolutely nothing to do with trans women. I'm just talking about gender. Like this is something that I've studied for years and gone over a million times and written documents on and have videos that are played in universities. Like I'm not talking about trans people, but it applies to trans people. So it's just something that happens to include them, but it's not based on them in any way. It's not like an inclusion thing.
You see, no, okay, but the societal distinction between the two effectively is that it's constructed for that reason. The reason why there's a separation between sex and gender is because of the societal ramifications that it was created. Like that was the reason why it was created in the first place, right? Because
no,
it comes out as a result of the feminist
pragmatics.
movement. It was based on pragmatics due to a certain metaphysical assumption that was based behind it, and certain social goals that were desired behind it, right?
No, I disagree. I think it's based on pragmatics solely, that we are actually communicating two different things.
There is no such thing as sole pragmatics. Pragmatics is fundamentally grounded in metaphysics.
Sure, but okay, so what I'm saying is it is sex and gender are actually two different things. Like you wearing a dress is not sex, but it can communicate sex. You can make an inference from that gender, but that does not mean that they are the same thing. So it is based on the pragmatics of it, that they are actually two different things.
And I'm saying that are-ness, that isness of the two, like to say that something is something else, can't solely be determined on a pragmatic basis.
Of course, I'm agreeing with you in saying that they are actually two different things. But
Fresh Pelmini, we gotta tie this.
Other things.
We gotta tie this call. Sure. I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't mean to cut you off. But we do have to tie up the call. So go ahead and finish your point, and let's let Tom respond, and then we're gonna move on to the next caller.
All right. I don't think I have anything else, so you may as well just go.
Oh, okay. Well, one thing before you do go, Fresh Pelmini,
don't do this to me. Don't do this to me.
I'm not doing it. But your fake ass countryman, Mello, your fake ass countryman Mello owes me 20 of your fake ass Australian dollars, and better tell him pay up or else. Right,
because we all live in the same area, and the same way that someone from Kansas is the same as someone from California.
Well, I mean, at least those places are real. Anyway, have a great day. Have a great day, Fresh Pelmini.
It's like discussing which part of Middle Earth you're from.
Exactly, it's ridiculous. Noah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Yeah, this question is for Tomfoolery, because obviously the Bible was written 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, right? So these concepts that you're talking about were invented in the past, like 50 years or so, right?
Right.
So what would the Bible have to say in the text for it to prohibit transgenderism, like given the vernacular of the time?
I think it probably does. I think it does say that transgenderism is wrong.
But isn't the whole point of this debate to say that it is compatible with Christianity?
I'm saying that, so the way that the debate was was communicated to me is whether or not we would call a trans woman a woman. That's what I was here to argue. That's what I argued.
But according to biblical terms,
No,
you
that
think we
was
would?
not. Hang on. That was not what was relayed to you. Specifically, I have the. If you want to pull up the DMs, you can. But it was specifically on the topic of the compatibility with Christianity.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
All right. Just wanted to clarify that.
So
Sorry.
how's it compatible with Christianity then? I don't understand. I mean, I guess that was the whole premise of the debate, but so you do agree Christianity prohibits transgenderism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would that make it compatible with transgenderism if it prohibits it?
So again, compatible is within the language. And that's what I'm arguing, is that like saying we, sleeping with another man is wrong. Sure. But that doesn't mean that we don't call them gay because they're not supposed
I
to
have a
sleep
question.
with another man.
If we all as a society decided that adulterer meant somebody who does not have relations with, does not cheat on their wife, would that make adultery, could we change the definition of adultery and now it's okay in
No,
society?
that's exactly what I'm arguing, is that the definition in the Bible then would change because it would no longer mean the same thing culturally. And so the Bible would change its wording to actually communicate what it is that we mean.
But when the Bible is using these terms, it's talking about sex very obviously, even down to the fact that gender roles, right, which you would consider socially constructed, are bound to natural law. Literally in Genesis, it talks about how marriage, the institution of marriage, the hierarchy, patriarchy, all this stuff is built into nature, is literally what the Bible says. Doesn't that completely defeat the whole transgender?
Parts of it, I would say that somebody is more likely to be feminine if they're a female, that there's biological imperatives within their brain that make them more likely to act feminine, for sure.
But that's not what the nature of this debate's about Christianity, but that's not what Christianity says. That's the complete opposite, right, of what Christianity says. Not only does Christianity identify male and female, but if you look at St. Paul's epistles, if you look at the Gospels, it directly connects this concept with a biology, with gender norms, and with roles in society. It says
that's what I just said. I'm sorry, maybe you misunderstood. I said somebody who is a female is obviously more likely to be feminine.
But in the Bible, does it say more likely? Where does it
Or you just said the Bible says the opposite, where it doesn't. It's saying the same thing. It's just so when we're talking about somebody who has gender dysphoria, obviously this is somebody who is not likely to act in accordance with their sex, right? That doesn't mean that we should say oh no, your brain is telling you to act like a different gender and you're not getting those feminine things that we would expect from your brain, but you just we expect you to act feminine anyways. That's what you're saying, is that the science on this is just wrong, and that they're not that their masculinity isn't coming from their brain, or their femininity.
Yeah, but we're not arguing about the science, right? The argument is about Christianity and transgenderism, not science and transgenderism, right? So
right.
Wouldn't that defeat your entire point if Christianity forbids it and also defines it completely contrary to how you define it? Wouldn't that make it incompatible?
Again, that the definitions change over time. The words in the Bible change over time.
Doesn't it say in the Bible that God does not change? Isn't that the whole point? Doesn't it literally say that?
Do you think God uses language?
Yeah, but he uses language to explain concepts. The concepts, sure, the language can change, but the concepts stay the same.
That is based on our own shortcomings as humans, because we couldn't possibly understand the way that God communicates. We can only categorize things and recognize patterns, and that's what we're doing in order to communicate what it is that we believe God wants us to do.
When the Holy Scripture talks about male and female, they're obviously talking about concepts. It's not just words, right? They're not just meaningless words. It's talking about it in terms of concepts, right?
Correct.
And how do you think Scripture is defining these concepts?
That, again, you're saying the same thing as me. I'm saying that if the words changed and the definitions changed,
I'm not saying the same thing.
The Bible would change to say what it is that we believe it means. So if we say, well, woman no longer means that, Bible's talking about females, then the Bible would change the word to female.
But the concept is still the same. So you can change the word, but the concept. So then the Bible's concept is not compatible with your concept, right?
Yes, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that
it's not compatible. Okay.
But what the Bible is communicating.
Let him finish, Colin. Okay, guys, we got to wrap this call up. No, I'm going to give you
thanks,
a
man.
last point, and then I'm going to let Tom respond to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I would say is I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything else, but thanks for the call in anyways. Yeah.
Of course. And then Tom, do you have anything else you wanted to respond to there?
Yeah, I didn't understand the difference that he's trying to point out, because that is what I'm saying, is that the Bible's communicating something specific, and so we would want the Bible to make sure that it adjusts to communicate that thing.
But okay, this is the last point. I'll make one last point. Do you think what the Bible is trying to communicate overall? You look at Adam and Eve, St. Paul's epistle, all this stuff. You can put it together. Do you think what the message is trying to communicate is in line with the transgenderism, or do you think it's opposed to it?
As I said, I believe that Christianity is opposed to transgenderism.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much, caller. Appreciate it very much. Guys, well, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, and others, I guess. We are moving in.
It's unchristian to say ladies and gentlemen. You say gentlemen and ladies because of the hierarchy.
Gentlemen, we have to move over to the super chat portion of the show. Appreciate that very much. You can still get those in. I'm going to start with the Dono chat side. Tom, again, thank you very much for coming on tonight. I know that sometimes it can feel brutal being in the hot seat, but you're an experienced debater. I don't think you have too much problem with it.
That's what I'm here for, man.
And $20 comes in from Joseph Newton. He says, they, them will eventually become was where. Oh, no. $10 comes in from ESPN 8, the Ocho. He says, Tom, I know this may be difficult, but would you show us on the doll where the sola scriptura to you? Seriously, though, if nothing about your do-it-yourself Christianity excludes degeneracy, because my language, why not just be secular? Well, I guess the joke's on him, huh, Tom?
I feel like we answered that one early on.
I guess the joke's on him. So yeah, going back through the super chats, Ray sends in $1.99. He says, chewing Copenhagen is based. Okay. I'm glad you think so. Ray wanted a Copenhagen emoji, but it costs to get an emoji in the chat. Godzilla sends in $5 Canadian, $5.50 Canadian, in fact, which is almost $1 US. He says, I'm late. I need a catch up. Has Beardson's wife is he still at the left him status? The answer to this question is yes. Beardson Beardley's wife did leave him. We are still in that status. Philip James, one for $2, says, who thinks transitioning is a positive outcome? This question for both.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do with the transitioning, right? Like that. Wouldn't that depend on what the goal of transitioning is and what the outcome you're hoping for is?
Posh?
I don't know who thinks it is. Probably the woman who said that all the money you would invest in the entire transition surgery is just paid back by phalloplasty, and the rest is just on top. So I think she thinks it's positive.
It's a phalloplasty with a little dick on top. Anyway, over to a $5 super chat comes in from Mean Joe Hicks. He says, Posh is a hypocrite because he disagrees with the funny lab coat man. I'm guessing that this is a critique saying that Tom is banking his arguments around science, though I don't think he really did, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he was doing a socially constructive version of definitions and arguments that way. But
I think they're talking about where I'm saying that, like, if the scientific consensus says that transitioning is what lowers dysphoria, and then abiding with their preferred pronouns and things like that, that this would actually be helpful to them to exist within society, that I'm agreeing with the funny lab coat man.
Okay.
But does it help them exist within society, or does it help them feel better themselves? Because I don't see how it makes them function better in society.
Well, if a mental illness is something that causes you trouble existing within society, and gender dysphoria is something that is a mental illness, and transitioning lowers your dysphoria, then yes, ontologically, it would help you exist.
Does it because transitioning?
Why would that be ontological?
because it's going to wrap back around to the front where like we're already basing this on whether or not it helps you fit into society based on what a mental illness is.
I'm not sure that's ontological.
I think
okay.
you're
I think
using
it
the
is,
wrong
but yeah.
word. Okay, but I'm still saying like people can go through transitioning and not be, what do you call it, passable, I think is the word. Yeah. And I don't think that helps them function better in society. But I suppose if everyone pretends it's true, like if someone's got someone is a narcissist and everyone around them started praising them all the time, you could say that helps with the narcissistic personality disorder. That does not mean that is what you should be doing. So
right.
I disagree with that.
Do you see this fucking chat?
We are very difficult to hate unless you're any of the countries around us.
All right, moving on to super chat by Jim Bob says, Tom, do we call a robot human if it looks like a human and fills the role of a human?
Based on the utility of calling something a robot, it's going to be based on the fact that it's not human and that it is something mechanical. So no, obviously not.
Well, you see, that's ontological.
That is ontological,
as opposed to a human. But if it is a very convincing android, why wouldn't we call that android a woman? Like they have enough moving parts to replicate all sorts of subtle, cues and ways of speaking, phraseology and anatomy and whatever. Why wouldn't we call that android a woman?
So same thing earlier. It's based on what it is you're trying to communicate. So with womanhood, we're trying to communicate a pattern. With a chair, we're trying to communicate a pattern. But with a robot, we are not trying to communicate a pattern. We're trying to communicate something else within the robot. As with human,
but who
we're
is?
not trying to
I'm not saying if you and I made it, and then you and I, what do we call it? But we send it out into the world, right? And this person is convinced. But I think what you're basically saying is we don't because it's not, and that's sort of the entire point.
Yes, but it's not is based on the definition. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you guys were having a bit of more of an exchange there. Let me go ahead and move on to the next super chat. Appreciate the answers to that, guys. Gourdzilla for another $5.50 Canadian. By the way, thank you everybody who gifted all the memberships. I think we got like 20 memberships gifted tonight. Appreciate that very much. Helps us out a ton. Gourdzilla says, so close, but the answer was Tom. I don't know what that's in reference to. I'm going to have to timestamp that and go back. Like, if you're going to send in those kinds of super chats, put in the context, right? That way we can, because I want to laugh at Tom, and I can't. I literally can't laugh at him because I don't know what this is in reference to.
That's messed up. You're depriving us of laughing at Tom.
That's fucking bullshit. Willie Jenkins for $2 says the Tom Pradley Show. Okay. Not a verse for $5 says, Tom, has Chris Hansen ever asked you to have a seat? Oh, no. That's fucked up.
That's funny.
That is funny. I admit it is. Wicked Wally for $5 says, what do you call a Japanese man who takes it in the ass? A Caucasian. Oh, no.
But wait a minute. Does that mean that Caucasians can become Asians by the men chopping the ween?
You know.
So now they're just Asian.
Wicked Wally, have to send in one more dad joke, but that one was brutal. Will Ham Bones for $10 says, absolutely nothing. My favorite kind of super chat. Willie Jenkins for another $5 says, tomfoolery is too liberal to commit to liberty. To physically change your sex requires transhumanism, which is a direct weapon against Christianity.
It's foolery, Tom, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the first time the dyslexia came in handy. No. Anyway, let me just go back over, just make sure I didn't miss anything over on the dono side, and looks like we're good over there. I think that'll do it for the debate. Guys, I really appreciate it very much. Hope you guys both had a very good time. Tomfoolery, take a moment first. Shout your channel out to everybody where they can find you. By the way, his channel is growing by leaps and bounds. He's been working at it really hard. The Tomfoolery Show, I stop in there every now and again, talk a bunch of shit, and I haven't been thrown out of the chat yet. And you know, that's saying something. So go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, my name's Tom. I go by Tomfoolery Show. The show is based on like challenging people's thoughts, really trying to like get anybody of any type of political categorization to think of different things and you know, charitably understand other people's points of view. Yeah, the other day we had Andrew on with Big Tech and you know, handled a disagreement that they had. I had Mr. Girl on couple of days ago. Destiny will be on in a couple of days to talk about Mr. Girl's manifesto on him. And so, yeah, we cover all sorts of different topics and all sorts of different, you know, questions and philosophy and politics and all sorts of crap. So, yeah, it's Tomfoolery Show. You got to remember the show on YouTube.
Appreciate that very much, Tom. And then Posh Redneck.
Yes.
Give me some fucking time of fucking... You know what? Just fuck off, Posh. How's it? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Right. So, because I've been going through quite a few problems with the setup and had to exchange parts, and that had to become international, so we won't do that. We won't talk about that. I'm still not be able to stream, but it's the Posh Redneck, and I wanted to. Or _posh_redneck on Instagram is where you can message me or something. And I post memes. And I would like to end with a quotation. An open mind is like a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded.
So
which is from Warhammer.
I am going to toss in my favorite Posh Redneck quote to date, which is only when a mosquito lands on a man's balls does he know that he can't solve everything with violence. Right? It's my favorite quote to date, right? Take it to the bank. It was great. Appreciate it very much.